I go sail on it. Oh Lord, I go sail on it. Whether it fast or slow, wheresoever it goes, I go in with it. Tell them I go in with it.
And it's just about 6:11 in Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome back. We are now speaking with Dr. Jerome Tilak Singh to get his views on the inauguration and the swearing in of President of the Republic, Christine Kangaloo, the country's second female head of state. Doctor, good morning.
Good morning to you and your viewers.
Yes. Doctor, well, I suspect this says a lot for Trinidad and Tobago as it relates to our maturity, having the second woman in the post of President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes, I think it is a groundbreaking event to have two females, serving in the highest office in the land. And I think we should pat ourselves on the back. Trinidad and Tobago, has certainly proven that, gender is not a barrier.
Yeah. Yesterday, I'm sure you did have the opportunity to listen to the president and also maybe read this morning in the newspaper as to some of the things that she would have said. Not a very traditional address.
I certainly agree. It wasn't a political address. It was more patriotic.
Yeah, and more for the people, you would say?
Correct, especially when she mentioned that she wants to demystify the role. She wants to use the bandstand for cultural and educational events. So I certainly agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that has been one of the problems concerning the office of president in Trinidad and Tobago. It was always seen as the president's office here, the people down there, and there was, I suspect there was a connection, but not a very close connection with the president's office. And I think it is safe to say that what President Kangaloo is trying to do is have that connection with the people.
Correct. I also want to mention that it's not just our country trying to establish that connection. In the UK, United Kingdom, many citizens feel that the monarchy has been a burden on the taxpayers for many years, and that they feel isolated. So it's something that I think heads of state need to reconsider, how they could connect with the people, the grassroots, the common person.
Yeah. Because there are constant questions, nagging questions in Trinidad and Tobago about the role and the function of the President of the Republic. And I think that also that maybe people just don't understand what the office of the President does, what the President does.
I agree with you. A lot of times people just feel the President is a rubber stamp, a figurehead, something of, cosmetic value and could easily be removed. So I think what we need to do, and I'm glad that the President mentioned that in her speech, we need to start off with the primary schools, try to educate the next generation, the present generation, about what is the role of the President, what is the meaning of having that position in our country.
Yeah. Doctor, what is the role of the President?
The role of the President in our country is someone to ensure that those three bodies, the executive, judicial, the legislature, that they are separate. The President has an important role to ensure, that these three important bodies, are not just separate, but that there is no sort of influence, unjust, undue influence. And I also, should mention that the President has a very important role in being a mediator, which we have seen in the past. Remember when we had that 1818 tie in the elections between the UNC and the PNM, and the President, Anna Robinson, had to intervene. Even when we had the attempted coup, the President played a very important role. So I want to put that forward to the public to remember that the President has a very important mediator role and neutral role to help the three arms of our country, three important arms.
Yeah. There's also the argument that the president is really a rubber stamp.
That is so, especially when the president has to sign off on important documents and give that final signature. But the president also has the power to reject whatever is put in front of his or her face. And we saw that again in President Robinson's time when Mr. Pandey wanted to appoint senators who lost the elections. So the president has powers that the public are not aware of, and they often, when they see these powers, they feel the president is trying to rock the boat or be rude or something.
Yeah, or even be political. And you would remember, Doctor, the amount of trouble, as it were, Mr. Robinson got into at that time with Prime Minister Basdew Pandey. Right?
Yes.
So it's
that's a good indicator, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really a balancing act. But is it that the president can adopt, let's say, certain causes? In other countries, you see presidents adopting, let's say, women's issues, children's issues, speaking quite publicly, let's say, about the crime situation and about issues that are affecting the population. Is there a difficulty for a president of Trinidad and Tobago to do such things?
It's a very good question. And as you would know, in other countries, sometimes the president could become the patron of an organization, might be the supporter of an organization. But just as in the Senate, we have the Senate president trying to be neutral, except if there's an important vote, the president is supposed to appear neutral but give support on these issues, as you mentioned, children or crime or poverty. So the president could speak out on issues affecting the public. And I think this is what the public would like to hear. If there's something dealing with the environment, the oil spill, we want to hear the president talk about that. Pollution, we want to hear the president talk about unemployment. So we want, I believe, a president who has more empathy, more sympathy for issues affecting the public.
Doctor, has the time come when we in Trinidad and Tobago must think about electing a president of the Republic? And when I say electing, you know what I'm speaking about, not the electoral college, but citizens electing a president.
That would be an excellent idea. As you know, in the United States, they elect a president, but they do not have a prime minister. In Guyana, nearby Guyana, we have an elected president. So that it could be something that we should have the electorate decide. The EBC will have to play, of course, a very important role in deciding on the process, so that this could be part of constitutional reform, something that we might want to think about. Maybe that topic could be beyond the president.
But Doctor, we are so political in Trinidad and Tobago. Even if you consider something like that, isn't there a risk of that individual, when that individual speaks, that certain statements could come across as political?
I fully agree. We live in a fiercely politicized country, so that if the president speaks on crime, she might appear in support of the opposition. If she supports one aspect of culture, she might appear neglecting other aspects of culture. So I fully agree that the president has to tread very carefully, and we also have to, be mindful that the president is human and she has to express her views.
How do we get the best candidate? And I'm not speaking about this situation. I'm speaking about controversy when it comes to the election of a president. How do we get the best candidate? Because there is always the view that this one is political, this one should not be affiliated with a political party. Do we want someone who is not associated with a political party, or is it that the best candidate is one who has no affiliation?
the best candidate in an ideal world would be somebody without any affiliation, to any political party or any NGO, somebody who is neutral, but that person is difficult to find because we have so many persons we live in a democracy. They are free to attend a political meeting. They are free to speak on an issue. So it's very difficult to choose somebody. And then we hear members of the public say, well, that person was a financier, or that person served in a body, maybe a public body, under a certain prime minister. So that in an ideal world, somebody without any affiliation would be perfect, but it's very difficult. Even we call them independent senators, but they have views they express, and sometimes they might appear aligned to a political party.
I know. it's very Trinidad and Tobago is a very a small place too, doctor, and sometimes persons in prominent positions, they are, let's say, invited to a fete or a christening or for some tea, and all of a sudden you have this cloud being put over them that they are somehow politically affiliated with persons. And is that, how do I say, is that fair to an individual?
It is not fair. It takes away part of our democracy. It takes away part of the independence of that person. If after this interview people say, well, I'm a supporter of TV6, I'm a supporter of Morning Edition, that's not fair to me, it's not fair to you all, right? So I think we need to understand that liberty, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, we have to cherish those values, and we also have to respect boundaries. There are certain political boundaries that once you cross that, you will be stereotyped, you will be stigmatized, and there are certain boundaries that you're allowed to talk about. So I think we need to understand that role of boundaries, and that attending a party or a birthday event doesn't mean you support that party, right? It could mean you support that person, maybe you're related to that person.
Yeah. And speaking about that, we're seeing that the opposition did not attend the inauguration. Do you have a view on that?
That was one of the, I think, the negative aspects of yesterday's event. It's a form of resistance. It's a form that we are accustomed to, that the opposition party would display. Sometimes in parliament they have a walkout or a no vote campaign. So it's a form of resistance that is part of a democracy. They're allowed to do that. Protesting is a form of protest, so that the opposition has that freedom to do that. But the opposition also have to be aware that the office of the president has to be respected. And it's a very important event because our school children were present yesterday. Our primary and secondary school students were there, and it would have been in good taste to see the entire parliament, all the senators and MPs out there in support of this president.
Doctor, the President of the Republic, Christine Kangaloo, has said that all of her plans, they are not pie in the sky. But we have heard presidents make announcements in the past and speak about their plans, but somehow there seem to be barriers maybe being put in place. How easy do you think it would be for President Kangaloo to embark on all of these plans she has announced?
It would be difficult, particularly when you consider that there are certain security issues surrounding the president and the prime minister, in that we cannot just say, we want to make the office of the president accessible to the public. There are certain security issues and protocols, so that we have to remember that, yes, there will be some sort of attempt to demystify the office, make it more open, but it will be something gradual, and it'll be something that the public must respect. This is not normal. This is not a fet, this is not where you could just pay your money and walk in. So I think that the office of the president will have to lay down the criteria, the guidelines to ensure that we, the public, understand what she's trying to do.
We have spoken about the connection or lack thereof when it comes to the office of the president and members of the public. Do you think that over the years, and we're speaking as far back as President Ellis Clark up to today, do you think that people still do have the respect that they have or had for the president's office?
It's a very good question, and I want to suggest that this respect could have been fluctuating. It's a respect in which wasn't constant, it wasn't on a decline. When we had presidents there who made pronouncements or had political affiliations, I would want to say that the office suffered. The president might have, been a victim of verbal abuse and criticisms because of his statement or her statement. So it's a good question. It's not something in which we constantly respected and adored and worshiped, but it is something in which fluctuated according to what that president did or said.
And I ask it in the context because I've been around in the media for a number of years, a few years, all right? And what I've noticed is that years ago, you would have, and I'm not speaking about any particular president, but I'm speaking about in the past, you would have, when presidents spoke, it would seem like the entire country would have shut down. And everyone was listening to the radio. Everyone was looking at the television. We would report it on the day that the president was speaking and also on the day after. And I think that over the years, we just do not see that sort of interest by the citizenry when it comes to what the president says.
I fully agree. And two of the issues that could contribute to this would be, firstly, we have a new social media. We have all these platforms existing, so that sometimes people might be distracted. They want to watch TikTok or they want to watch Facebook. So they have other avenues on that social media platform. And secondly, a lot of times people, the grassroots, the common person, they are so concerned with survival, the day-to-day struggle, that they feel disconnected from what the president is saying. So I think that could be two of the reasons that would, answer your question about how the presidents have failed in the past to grab our attention and grab the media's attention.
Yeah, I think too, there may have been an issue with sometimes with what you say, there has to be action. And I'm seeing in the newspaper this morning, certain commentators are saying that it will not be an easy road for the president. In fact, some have said it's going to be a rocky road for the president.
It certainly will be, especially where we see our economy suffering. So people will be questioning the office again of the president, its existence, its function, its role. But the president yesterday mentioned about she needed advice, volunteers to guide her. She talked about the need for archives for the president, to record the history. So I think this is where the public need to understand that, there is a need to create, a source of knowledge for the present and the future of the role of the president, how the president should conduct himself or herself.
Do you think that as president of Trinidad and Tobago, one feels that anything that they do and anything that they say, it has to be tempered?
It certainly has to be tempered. As I mentioned earlier, the president has to appear neutral, non-partisan. And that's something that comes across, as, affecting a culture or affecting an ethnic group, will certainly be met with harsh criticism. So that word tempered is very important, and I want to add the word neutral and non-partisan.
Dr. Jerome Tilak Singh, thank you very much for speaking with us this morning, sir.
Thank you for having me here.
All right. So it's time for a break. We do have a traffic update for you from Ariapita Avenue. When we come back, we are taking your calls. All right. So get to your phones, stand up and be ready, sit down and be ready to call us, because we are going to be discussing the swearing in of Christine Kangaloo as the 7th President of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. We are coming back.
Islands in the sun.